1290 BC. The peaceful morning turns into a nightmare. A massive Greek fleet materializes from thin air near the coast of Anatolia. The people panic as the person who leads them cannot be negotiated with. He cannot be reasoned with. His name is Piyama-Radu, the terror of the Hittites. The actions of this man alone would snowball into the downfall of all great empires of the era that through sheer hubris thought they could hold the world in the palm of their hand, ushering the world in what is known as the Bronze Age collapse. Indeed, the so-called Sea Peoples are not some mysterious entities coming out of nowhere to destroy the world, but are a direct result of what happens when one man decides to stand against an empire, inspiring others to follow his footsteps and topple the old regimes for a better future. His actions around historical Troy and Western Anatolia, along with his personal values, would also immortalize him as the mighty Achilles some 400 years later by the Greeks in the Iliad, a connection that will be explained extensively by the end of the video. The main sources of this video's analysis will be 5 surviving Hittite texts that mention Piyama-Radu, translated in the book The Ahiyawa Texts, a must-read for Bronze Age history enthusiasts. In the 13th century BC, the Bronze Age world was a rich tapestry of civilizations. The two most powerful nations were the rich Egyptian New Kingdom in the south and the pious Hittite Empire in Anatolia, vying for control of the Near East, their hostilities culminating in the famous Battle of Kadesh, 1275 BC. The Hittites, originally arriving in Anatolia in the 18th century BC, valued religious piety above everything else. The so-called Hittite Great King held absolute authority over the nation, often seen as the earthly representative of the storm god, Tarhun. A strict top-down hierarchy of ruler and governed was enforced, with the Great King at the top, followed by direct family and the council of nobles, high officials, and priests. The bottom tiers of the pyramid were populated by free commoners, serfs, and slaves. They held a vast amount of vassal states at their borderlands, boosting its economy and population with more serfs and slaves, since Anatolian population has been in decline for unknown reasons in the last century or so, a fact reflected by the rising leniency on laws involving the death penalty. Order was crucial to maintain the Hittite Leviathan. Their perceived strength was key to the survival of the status quo of the world they have created. This era of global trade and prosperity inevitably saw the rise of other nations as well. These include a united Libyan confederation in Africa, a thorn in Egypt's side, and the rise of Bronze Age Assyria, who was chipping away at the Hittite influence in the east. A variety of other peoples also lived between the two nations, like the Mitanni, descending from very ancient Anatolian groups, and others of unknown origin. The Kaskian tribes, at times united under strong leaders, lay in Pontus, often conducting devastating raids into Hittite territory and then retreating to their mountainous fortifications. A kingdom known as Al-Asiya lies in Cyprus, largely independent and rich, exporting vast quantities of bronze to the world. Linear A script tablets were found to be used in the area at some point, but there is no agreed consensus on the kingdom's origins. Western Anatolia was ruled by Luwian peoples, fragmented into 7 main territories, including Wilusa, better known today as Troy, with some retaining a degree of independence, while others falling into direct Hittite vassalage. Luwians have been living all over Anatolia, but we will see that these states particularly played a key role in the events leading to the Bronze Age collapse. Our protagonist, Piyama-Radu, also descends from the people of Mira, or Seha, most probably. The Luwians were a much older civilization, with evidence of Luwian settlement going back to 2200 BC. Their culture was not monolithic, with a large variety of diverse local subcultures. The Lukkans, for example, were known for their seafaring and free-spirit nature, their lands being a safe haven for pirates and mercenaries. Seha Riverland, on the other hand, focused on religious duty, hosting a very important to the ancient world deity, an idol of a goddess from Lazpa with healing and fertility powers, often argued to be a progenitor to the Greek goddess Aphrodite. As stated before, Hittite vassalage meant they would have to constantly provision their overlord with grain and manpower, especially during times of crisis where the levied men and resources were extravagant at a moment's notice under the guise of emergency. Naturally, they have always resisted central Hittite control. In fact, in 1370 BC, the kingdom of Arzawa was formed by these peoples and almost toppled the Hittite state completely. Even the Egyptians had proposed a royal marriage with the newly formed nation. Nevertheless, the rebellion was drowned, and the state was fractured into more manageable, smaller polities. The spirit of the Arzawan people was not budging, however, and Arzawa would return one final time in the future. Mycenaean and Phrygian tribes of Balkan origin also have been living in Thrace and northwestern Anatolia, with Mycenaeans engaged in constant competition with Wilusa. Lastly, two prominent Greek peoples, the Achaeans and Dorians, have been also rising to power. Some scholars argue common ancestry with the Phrygians due to similarities in the language between archaic Greeks and Phrygians later on in the Iron Age, but that's still highly debated. The Achaeans started rising to prominence in the 18th century BC, and by the 13th century, they dominated most of the Aegean. They valued martial prowess, often serving as highly sought mercenaries overseas and engaging in piracy, but keeping a sophisticated hierarchical structure of governance at home. There is a lot of debate on what was the nature of Achaean dominion. Linear B tablets show a loose city-state-like confederation of begrudgingly allied cities that were at a constant competition against each other. However, Hittites and Egyptians clearly mention that a king with authority over all Mycenaeans ruled Greece. This leads us to believe that probably in times of strength, the Achaeans were a united entity under one ruler, exerting influence overseas while fracturing into smaller states in times of dynastic struggle or decentralization. The Greeks also had brokered a vassalage out of Miletus, or Milawanda, an originally Luwian city, gaining a permanent foothold over Anatolia, showing how their influence grew over time. The local Milawandan governor was free to excerpt his own influence at the expense of other Luwian rulers. Indeed, the Achaean-backed, Luwian-speaking city-state had several settlements under direct or indirect vassalage itself. The ever-growing power of the Greek warrior elite kept pushing for overseas influence in order to increase their individual profits and fame, and as we will see later, they eagerly aided the freebooter Piyama-Radu in his ventures. An Anatolian warlord named Uhha-Ziti, in 1320 BC, united many Luwian states one final time to resist imperial control, reforming the old kingdom of Arzawa. After some initial success, according to the Hittites, after they pleaded to their god of thunder for help, a lightning bolt struck Uhha-Ziti and he fell ill. And that's when they decided to attack the rebellious kingdom. After a series of battles, Uhha-Ziti and at least 15,000 of his people fled to the Aegean islands, controlled by the Achaean Greeks, also known as the Mycenaeans. The Greeks played a major role in these conflicts, often inciting and supporting such revolts to spread their influence in the area. However, this rebellion was futile, as Hittites completely broke the disloyal state, putting loyalists in charge and enslaving 65,000 civilians. Uhha-Ziti died overseas, and the Achaeans were forced to extradite one of his sons to the Hittite authorities to make peace, as their vassal state, Milawanda, was threatened. This was the last time the Luwian peoples have united under one banner. 15,000 people had fled to the Mycenaean islands during the Uhha-Ziti rebellion, as well as his family. Although still debated, we can confidently assume that the troublemaker Piyama-Radu was a direct descendant of Uhha-Ziti, or at least was of Luwian royalty. Born and raised in exile, he probably saw as his birthright to claim Western Anatolia and break the Hittite yoke. By the time he reached his 30s, he has gathered enough support to fulfill his destiny. He married one of his daughters off to the governor of Miletus, Atpa, securing an alliance with the vassal ruler for legitimacy, as well as he leveraged the Achaean interests in Anatolia to secure military backing and a safe base of operations in a Mycenaean island. Around 1295 to 1280 BC, a Mycenaean mercenary force under Piyama-Radu's orders lands near Wilusa, or in Greek Ilion, better known as Troy. The force causes an insurrection, threatening to depose the Wilusan king with an interesting name. He was called Alexandu, or in Greek, Alexander. Hittite forces, with the help of local Sehan troops, dispatched towards the area to attempt to drive out the force, with the Sehar River land king, Manapa-Tarhunta, claiming to be sick and not able to join the campaign. With the Sehan troops distracted, Piyama-Radu, at the head of another Greek force, unexpectedly attacks the Sehar mainland from the sea, humiliating the king Manapa-Tarhunta and forcing him and his kingdom under direct vassalage of his son-in-law, Atpa. Right after, he attacks the island of Lazpa, Greek Lesvos, and puts it under direct rule of Atpa. Lazpa was never truly recovered by the Anatolians again, marking the end of Anatolian rule over the Aegean Sea. Despite these efforts, however, Hittite control was reinstated soon after, with the force attacking Troy being driven out and Sehar Riverland falling under Hittite authority once more. Piyama-Radu successfully evades capture by crossing to his island. We have an unprecedented series of events. A Luwian ruler, under Greek vassalage, with his base in Greek islands, attacks amongst others. A Greek ruler, under Hittite vassalage, with his base in Luwian lands. We can only imagine how a Greek ruler ended up ruling Hittite territory. Perhaps his ancestors were also royal rebels persecuted out of Greece and found refuge in Asian lands, just like with Piyama-Radu's people. This would explain somewhat the casus belli of the Greeks to justify an attack of that area. The Sehan king also didn't want to join the expedition to stop the insurrection, clearly fearing the Greeks' reprisal, but that didn't save him as Piyama-Radu attacked him anyway, and humiliated him, in his own words. The Hittites were strong under the great Muwatalli II, and all Piyama-Radu could do was wait for a better chance to strike again. Piyama-Radu's patience paid off after the death of one of the greatest Hittite kings in history, when the Hittite state was weakened with dynastic struggles and eastern invasions. The chance to strike was now or never. Piyama-Radu establishes a base of operations in neutral Carian lands, near Miletus territory, and marches onto Lucan territory, causing an insurrection. Some join him willingly, while others plead to the Hittites for help. 7,000 people were either forcibly or willingly relocated to Achaean territory, shipped across the sea. Bronze Age Lukka, or Lycia, was a loose confederation of cities, proud and free from Hittite authority, but now things were different, and they practically begged for help from the empire they have always resisted so much in the past. The Hittite Great King Hattusili arrives soon and sends his son Crown Prince Kurunta to take him by the hand and bring him to Hattusa on his chariot, to discuss terms and give him a kingdom he so much desires, since he was ambitious and capable. But the caveat was that the kingdom would be away from Luwian lands and Achaean reach and under Hittite authority. A typical warlord would jump on the opportunity to be honored and legitimized by riding with the crown prince and be given a kingdom to rule, no questions asked. But the Hittites clearly didn't understand what Piyama-Radu was after. When the crown prince presented the proposal to Piyama-Radu, he refused and demanded, "No, name me king now." The Hittites thought he was paranoid and afraid of being assassinated, and were legitimately confused by his response, since an assassination under these conditions would be extremely dishonorable, as he would be in direct protection of the Hittite king. But Piyama-Radu was not afraid. He didn't want to merely rule a patch of land somewhere far away. He wanted to reclaim his birthright, to rule over the Luwians, to bring back the so-called Kingdom of Arzawa under nobody's jurisdiction but themselves. He would never bow to a Hittite king. He would avenge his ancestors and take back his country, or die trying. He fortified his position in Iolanda while the Hittite king approached. warning him to not attack him and come to him peacefully. Again, we see the utter disbelief in the Hittite ruler's eyes as he is ambushed by Piyama-Radu's brother and is harassed from multiple elevated positions. Nevertheless, his forces were ultimately defeated, and Iolanda was captured and destroyed. Piyama-Radu managed to escape once again to his island, leaving the Hittites with nothing to work with once more. The Achaean king's brother, Tawagalawa, or in Greek Eteocles, arrived soon after to broker a peace with the Hittite king and put an end to the fiasco. The Hittites recognized for the first time the Achaean king as a great king, a so-called brother, and ask him to do one of the following regarding Piyama-Radu. Either extradite him to Hittite authorities, like they did with Uhha-Ziti's son, or keep him in his island, but be prevented from attacking the Hittites, probably by refusing to arm him with troops and supplies, or be expelled into Carcassa or Massa to establish his base, putting him well within Hittite reach. The Achaean response is not recorded, but we know that Piyama-Radu was never given up by the Greeks. He continued to terrorize the Hittites as, well into his 70s by now, Puduhepa, wife of Great King Hattusili III, prays for the gods to drown him in the waves of the sea and deliver him to them. Clearly, he still operated from his island, attacking the Hittites and their vassals at every turn. After about 10 years later, in the Milawanda letter, he is being referenced in past tense, mentioning also the deposition of a Trojan king, putting an end to his reign of terror. It seems that Piyama-Radu, before he left his last breath, finally managed to finish his first ever task, the thing he first went out to do, the way it all began, to finally conquer Troy. Piyama-Radu's ventures have proved that the Hittite Empire could no longer hold on to the power it once had. Through reasons that will not be analysed here, the once great Hittite dominion was beginning to crumble. If a mere warlord could cause such chaos with impunity, what could an organised foreign invasion do? Other individual Greek warlords noticed the power vacuum and soon launched massive raids and invasions, leading to mass migration of the Luwian peoples. The first domino has fallen, and a catastrophic series of events soon ushered the world in the era known as Bronze Age collapse, taking down the Hittites, the Egyptians, and strangely even the seemingly strong Mycenaean Greeks with them, a topic that will be analysed in another video. It's no wonder a man like this was immortalised by the Greeks as the myth of Achilles, as many historians believe today. Their commonalities cannot be overstated. They were both petty rulers operating from an island close to the Anatolian coast. They both attacked Mycia and conquered Lesbos for the Achaeans, as well as fought Carians and Lycians. They both attacked a king named Alexander, who ruled over Troy. Paris is also called Alexander by Homer. They both conquered Troy, but not before dying. But aside from these strikingly common events, there is a deeper connection between the two men. Achilles and Piyama-Radu represented the ideal man, in the eyes of the archaic Greeks, a source for inspiration to be mimicked. They were known for high martial cunning and prowess, highly sought values in a man. They defied authority by defying established kings when they have had both their honor tarnished and had what was rightfully theirs stolen by a tyrant. They stood by their values passionately. They sought to conquer and make their name known for thousands of years, at the expense of their safety and life, committing hubris in the process. They both died with the help of the gods, as the Hittites would claim, but not before fulfilling their destiny. Is it even a surprise that such a man inspired Alexander the Great, who attempted to embody all of these values, by conquering the known world, fighting in the front line, and defying gods and emperors to avenge the Greeks that suffered in the hands of Persia? Or is it a surprise that Achilles was worshipped as a godlike hero in the Greek frontier colonies of the Black Sea? where various adventurous Greek groups came together and, inspired by Achilles, sought to sail in hostile territories and carve a peace for themselves in foreign lands. Piyama-Radu never became king, but is the only person to be of no royalty and mentioned countless times in Hittite records. He left no poems of his own, but the Greeks immortalized him in their myths. Thousands of years later, he continues to inspire men to defy tyranny when others bow their heads, to defend their honor and seize their destiny, to fight for what is theirs, and if it cost their life, so be it. Their name will echo through the ages.